Welcome to another episode of The Lost and Founder. Today we have a very special guest, one of my fellow countrymen, another Aussie, if you will, Alli McLaren. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining. How's your day been so far?
It's been pretty good. It's just freezing in LA, so I feel like every time it's freezing, I just get super depressed. Not gonna lie. It's been one of those days where you go to Target and then you get Starbucks and then you lay in bed.
Wait, what's your definition of freezing?
I personally think that, and this is coming from someone who's lived in New York for the polar vortex and stuff, that winter that killed everybody's soul. I think that LA 50 degrees equals about 20 degrees in any other state. I don't know why. It's just more cold than it is anywhere. I was in the car with a blanket on, shivering.
Actually, I'm with you on that. Generally, I don't fuck around with anything under 60 degrees. I'm putting on a sweater or a hoodie or something. I'm delicate.
I'm my hand, I don't know what it is about LA. I think maybe everyone else is more equipped for it or something, and LA is so open that it's freezing, and I'm okay, I just stand there and shiver.
How long have you been in LA for?
I moved out here originally in 2014 from New York, and then pretty much have stayed ever since. Been to lived in Vancouver for a little bit, been home to Australia for a little bit. That wasn't necessarily by choice. That was just because my visa got denied, and then came back.
Yeah, that's a good enough reason.
Yeah, I had to leave.
So what brought you to the US to begin with?
I went to school for acting. I know this sounds weird, but in high school, I went to 3 different high schools, and I never really fit in, I think, with the Australian culture for some reason. I don't know why. That sounds really stupid, but I never really made friends. I never was happy in it. Ever since I was a little kid, I can remember I was no, I want to move to the US and act. And so when it came to applying for colleges, I didn't apply for anywhere in Australia. And I went to New York and LA during my senior year 12 on a tour for musical theater for a musical theater company that I was with, and then auditioned for different schools. And I don't know, I just literally, I was 18, I had no idea what I was doing, but it was never even I never even applied for anywhere in Australia. I had no idea what I was going to do. And so I just moved to New York with a student visa.
Going back to your time in Australia, where is home?
I grew up, I spent my first 11 years living in Melton, which was an hour outside of Melbourne. Back then it was not, we would call it Westie, a Westie area or something. I went to primary school there, and then we moved to Ballarat, which is another hour out of Melbourne, for high school. I spent 6 months commuting on a bus, and my sister did it for 2 years. I don't know how. And my grandparents were in Ballarat, so we just moved there.
That's really cool. So let's unpack this a little bit. So going through high school, like you say, you didn't have a lot of friends, a lot of close friends. You didn't feel you quite fit in. Did you suffer from depression or anxiety during this period, or do you think this might have contributed to it?
I definitely did. I wasn't very open about it, which I regret now. My sister also really struggled with different mental health issues and was in and out of mental health hospitals. And so I feel a lot of my, not problems, but I think a lot of everything that I was going through was maybe in shadow, because my parents, any parents, do the absolute best they can to fix the crisis at hand. And growing up, my sister was the crisis, and I'm so thankful that she made it through and everything.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that, I'm only 18 months younger than her, so a lot of and I was so different to her. She was so academically smart. I was more singing, acting, dancing and stuff. And so I think a lot of my problems really just slipped under the radar. And I also lied about them. I was not open about them. And yeah, so I just felt like I was always searching for attention. Once again, even though it's not my parents didn't give it to me, it was more just I could never find validation.
And that's interesting because you moved into the world of acting and performing as well. So it's
Seeking validation all the time.
exactly, yeah, you can see where you progressed into that career. So your decision to move to the US when you could, you applied, didn't apply for Australian colleges, you applied for America. Like, were your parents supportive of this during this time?
They were, my dad was the one that was like super, super supportive. And I didn't have the best relationship with my parents growing up. Once again, not to do with them, just completely like me in a way. Like I just wasn't a very open person. I didn't share much with them and stuff. But they were always really supportive of me acting and performing. And so when I applied for this college and got in, I remember my dad took me and my mom out for a coffee or something, coffee and cake. I think they call it in Australia back in the day. And we talked about it, and there was an LA campus and a New York campus. And my dad was like, I'm really supportive of you going. Obviously, my mom was too, but my dad was super vocal about it, which I was surprised about just because I never felt like him and I had that. He really showed how proud he was of me, and he really showed how supportive he was of me in that moment because I never felt like I necessarily had that connection yet. And he was like, I really think you should go to New York, though. If you're going to go overseas, like you should learn to live in New York instead of just LA. And I'm so thankful for that decision.
So that transition period, so you say you struggled making friends as a teenager, you moved to big city New York, you struggled with depression, anxiety. How was that transition for you?
In some ways, it was the most incredible transition in my life. In other ways, I really struggled. I loved it. I made two incredible friends from like pretty much week one of college, one of whom I had randomly met on Facebook in a group for people starting, and him and I had talked, and we ended up being in the same class because on the first orientation day we got grouped into like classes of 7 people, and that's what you're going to spend the rest of your year with. And him and I happened to be in the same class, and then there was this other girl in the class, and the three of us like literally became best friends. We were inseparable, and it was the first time I really felt like I'd had that kind of friendship in my life, which was really cool because I felt like we had very similar interests and stuff that I hadn't found in Australia. But I was also suffering majorly from anorexia. I'd grown up as a very not super overweight child, but I was always on the bigger side. And then moving to the US, I used to binge eat a lot when I was younger to deal with my emotions and stuff. And then knowing I was moving there for the first 8 months, I really just was like, okay, I want to lose weight now. I'm actually going and making this serious. And then I spoke to a therapist before I left Australia and said, I'm worried because I can't eat anymore. And she was like, you look fine. I think this is just a reason for you not wanting to go to the US. And so I used that as an excuse to be like, oh, I'm fine. And I think it was really easy for me because I was living by myself in a country that was on literally the other side of the world from my parents, that I could just not eat, or I could be struggling, or I could have days where I would not have food because I didn't think I deserved it and stuff, and nobody knew.
That isolation you had, like, living by yourself, especially in a city like New York, which can be a pretty lonely city, just seems to have compounded your mental health issues and exploded into anorexia, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's rough.
Yeah. I think like my entire 20s, pretty much, I just turned 30 this year, and I think my entire 20s pretty much resolved around my eating disorder problems. And I wonder what would have happened if I had either been taken more seriously when I went to speak to the therapist in Australia, or whether I'd had more visits with my family, or whether, like, I think more than anything, they knew that I was like struggling, but people were too scared to say anything, or they didn't want to offend me. Or also in the US industry at that point, we're speaking 10 years ago, I was blonde, I had green eyes, and I weighed 100 pounds. I was getting jobs left and right. And so people were like, oh, it's okay. She's just doing what she needs to do. I think it was really easy for people not to be feel comfortable saying something to, which also, like, I was just waiting for someone to be like, you're too skinny, and nobody ever said that to me.
So outside of your anorexia, what else was going through your mind? Yeah.
I think, like, when you're 18 and you move to a city that's bigger than you could ever imagine, every day is just like incredible and amazing, but it's also like a blur. I am a person, I'm a creature of habit. And so when my environment around me changes, I really struggle. And so I really, like, when I got used to living in New York for my first year, I really felt like I was learning to be who I was, but also like I was living in a huge lie, as in I was literally not eating and losing myself and tired and not turning up to auditions and like struggling to go to class 7 days or 6 days a week for 7 hours a day because my brain was just like not in it. Like I was just like tired. And then I went to my best friend, the guy that I'd met before classes, over the summer. He's, oh, why don't you come and live with me over the summer? Because we were both going to transfer to LA for our second year. And he's like, why don't you come live with my family over the summer so you can easily save money, you don't have to pay rent, and we can just have a cool summer together before we start college in LA. And I said yes. I also think that I wanted to say no, not because I didn't love him, but because I wanted to have a summer in New York and stuff. But I said yes because I also didn't want to lose a friend or let him down and stuff. And that's when also bulimia started for me, because I realized like I couldn't, everyone was gonna, his family were gonna see me eating, and like I had no control again. And that really took a toll on my mental health, like really badly.
Would you say that was your rock bottom moment?
I think my rock bottom moment was in August of that year when he was moving to LA. I ended up going back to Australia because I was so sick. And he also knew I was sick, but didn't understand it. And his family had noticed it, but they didn't get it. And I couldn't acknowledge what was going on. And I obviously lied about it and went back to Australia and felt further away from him and everyone than ever. And when I ended up spending like 9 months in Australia, I watched them like all go to school and stuff. I wasn't part of it anymore. And yeah, I would say like, I was throwing up 50 times a day for like 9 months. And I was, yeah, it was pretty shit.
Did your
That
family
was
notice
definitely
it?
rock bottom right there.
Did your family notice?
They did, but they were in total denial about it, or they once again just didn't want to bring it up. I don't think they knew how to deal with it. And I think obviously like I was lying about it. I was like, I don't know why I'm throwing up, like this and this, or I try to hide it from them and stuff. And it's not like they enabled me, but they did let me get away with it for a long time.
Sad that this seems to be a common occurrence with young women, not just in Australia but just the world nowadays.
Yeah.
It's just it's not even the fact that it happens, but we just don't know how to actually address it, how to bring it up,
Right.
how to talk about it.
Exactly, because we're so different. It's not until we have to be ready to talk about it as well. Like I know that I was such a defensive person too. So if anyone even brought it up, like how dare you like assume that about me and stuff. And I think also for the first time when I was living in New York, I felt really successful. And so when I came back to Australia and was in Australia for that time period, like anybody that I knew and stuff, I didn't want them to think that I was like failing and like I'd come back from the US and I'd failed. Like I wanted to go over there and make a career. And so it was, I felt embarrassed about everything, and I just really tried to hide it. And I had like a chip on my shoulder to prove to people that no, I'm going back there. Fuck you. You don't know anything about me. I'm not better than you, but I have bigger dreams than being in this small town.
So you're in this really bad time, you're in a pretty bad place. How did you get yourself up out of that the first time?
I remember like I literally was in bed one day and I had this moment where I think I read like a quote on Instagram or something. It was when Instagram was very new, and I'd also started building a following pretty quickly on Instagram because one of my best friends in college was Miss Teen USA at the time. And so I was very active on Instagram when it was like 2012 time. And so through that, I
Yeah.
gained followers. And I remember reading, I think it was some sort of stupid quote that had like the sky on it or something. But to be fair, I can't even remember what the quote was. But oh no, it was that like I woke up one day and just decided to change or something. And I remember like reading that and I was like, if I ever want to go back to the US, I have to stop. I cannot keep doing this. I haven't worked in 9 months. I haven't done anything in 9 months with throw up. And if I ever actually want to live in the United States again, I have to stop. And literally from that day forward, I did not throw up until I got back to the US.
That's quite a journey. What steps did you actually take to basically pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and be like, okay, fuck it. I need to do what it takes to get back to where I want to be?
It was September that I like made that decision. And then I went on to my school's website and they had a starting class in January. And I also knew at that point that I didn't want to go to LA for my second year. And I just was going there because my friends were going there. And I wanted to stay in New York for my second year. So at that point, I was like, there's a New York class that's starting in January next year. And I brought it up to my parents and I was like, and I came clean about everything. And I said, I need to go back. I am going to put in everything that I have in the next 3 months to get back there. I need your support on this. And obviously there were like hard conversations, but they definitely were like, okay, we think, yeah, this is best for you. You should go. And I really had to prove myself because I'd spent so long being sick. And like, every day I was like doing things to show that like I needed to get back there.
Did you seek out any therapy at that time?
No, I have only just recently started therapy. I think I had so many bad experiences with my sister because we would do like family therapy sessions and stuff. And I remember like them trying to blame us as a family for my sister. And I'm sure they didn't have bad intentions, but she went through a lot of therapists. I saw that happen. The encounters that I had, plus the encounter I had before I moved to the US, I was like very strong headed of like, what can they tell me if they've never lived in my shoes? I didn't go. I thought about it a lot. My mom wanted me to go. I told her I went, but I didn't go.
I did the same thing with my parents. Don't worry.
Oh, good. I love that.
So you made it back. How did that transition go?
I really started seeking validation in this transition. I found it very hard at school because before I'd left, I was like, my first year, as I said, like I was really small, like I was everyone wanted to be my friend. And I don't say that in like a obnoxious way. I say that in a way of like I've been the overweight kid and I've been the skinny kid, and there's a difference.
Yeah.
And so when I went back, I was no longer the skinny kid and stuff. And I didn't know anybody. I had some of the same teachers, but I was such a different person that I almost felt like I was embarrassed that I'd gotten bigger and stuff. And I felt like I spent a lot of time apologizing. And of course, like I was on camera at school every single day. I was studying acting for film and like we were recorded every day. And seeing yourself and seeing the differences is really mentally very hard. I think it took 2 or 3 months before I even felt okay. There were so many times where I like called my mom crying, being like, I want to go home. And she's like, no, you don't. Like, just hold it out. And she was right. But it took a long time to even realize that like, I'm not the same person and it's okay. But I always felt like I had to apologize for being the same person. And I also ended up dating a 40-year-old guy who was married, not married, but he had a kid with like, 3 different people and was also abusive, like, is in jail now. Like he like almost killed his previous girlfriend and stuff. And put myself in just a stupid situation and put more energy and effort into him than I did for anything else.
So it's just like an escape from what you're already going through with your acting.
100%. Because I was feeling like I was getting nowhere near as many auditions, nowhere near as much like roles or like anything like that. My agency dropped me and stuff. Yeah.
Wow. So when you're in front of the camera and you're going through this mental battle, like, what was it, like an inner voice that was inside your head that was just telling you things, or was it just like a feeling you were getting?
100%. Literally, it was just like, you're so fat. You look awful. You look so ugly. I can't believe you let yourself look like that.
How did you turn that around? Because
To be fair, like I haven't to this day 100% turned it around. I think between then and now, obviously I've been through a lot and been a lot of different sizes and stuff. I got to the point where in 2017, I realized that nobody was going to fulfill what I wanted to hear. I could be the skinniest person in the world. I realized that I was never going to be the skinniest person in the room. I was never going to be the prettiest person in the room. I was never going to be the most talented person in the room. And I realized that I had to be okay with that, because there's always going to be somebody who like is better. Not like a better person or anything, but I went through a stage of realizing nobody was my competition except for me and stuff. And then that's when I took a step away from doing what everybody wanted me to do and then creating my own stuff. And with a lot of help from friends and stuff, I created a pilot that then we worked with huge influences and stuff for it, and then got sold and everything. And then I started creating my own content and stuff and taking a lot more control of being in front of the camera. And I still have moments where I'm like, oh, I hate myself. Obviously, I feel like most people, I hope, no, I don't hope, but I feel like most people have moments where, oh, I look like shit. But it's definitely taking that pressure off of me from being like, you need to be perfect for everybody else. Like now I write my stuff. I'm able to fund it. I've sold stuff, like I've acted and stuff I've sold and everything. And it's so much, it's just like a control that like I never knew that I needed.
Step back for a second. You mentioned, I want to revisit this. So you were in this relationship. It was an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
It was happening around the same time where, you were going through these body dysmorphia type issues.
Yeah.
First question is, why? What was bringing you back to this situation that you knew was toxic and dysfunctional? And secondly, did anyone notice and just say, hey, what are you doing?
No, nobody noticed. My friends all knew him and the situation, and they just laughed about it, I think. I don't know whether they laughed about it behind my back, but they like laughed about it with me. My friend in LA, the guy that I'd lived with this summer, him and I mended our relationship once I got better and stuff. And he was actually the one that moved me out to LA in a way. Like I went to visit him to go to the Teen Choice Awards in 2014. I gotta say, yeah, 2014. And and I remember we were in his car and I was like, oh my God, like, I'm so happy right now. And I said that and I was like, I wish this was my life every day. And he was like, it can be. Move to LA, come live with me. I'll kick my roommate out. I hate him. We throw eggs at each other. And I realized in that moment, I was like, yeah, I can. Like, why am I looking for validation in somebody who's not even like why I'm in the United States in the first place? And he's never, the best case scenario is that I can get away. The worst case scenario is he kills me with his track record.
Yeah. So you moved to LA.
So I moved to LA.
And then How was that? Obviously, there was some other factors that went into that decision.
Not really. I'm very impulsive. And if I've set my mind on it, I'll do it regardless of what anyone thinks is a smart thing to do. I'll come up with reasons.
You'll find some way to justify it to everybody.
100%.
You should have been an attorney.
Yeah.
So what was that process like?
I loved it at the start. It was hard. LA and New York are like different countries. I didn't have my driver's license because I lived in New York since I was 18.
Yeah, you didn't need one.
I didn't need one. So I didn't have a car. I didn't have my driver's license. I didn't know the city. I didn't have many contacts out there. Like New York, I knew a lot of people. I was part of a lot of like different production companies and stuff. For LA, I was like completely starting fresh and didn't have any agency representation or anything. But I think the worst thing was I didn't have a car or my license. And so Caleb, my friend, taught me how to drive in like a week and a half in his car. And then I went to try to get my driver's license and I failed the first time because I don't really know why. The guy was just mean.
I mean, it's the DMV. That's their job.
Yeah. He said that I was changing lanes too aggressively, which probably was right. But also Caleb changed. It's LA. Like you have to change lanes aggressively.
Yeah, that's the only way to drive in LA.
And he said I was like, I went too quickly to change lanes and stuff. And I was just like, yo, like what? But anyway, so I failed that one. And then I went back literally the next day because my dad was coming the following week. And I was like, no, I have to have my license because I need to ask him to help me buy a car. And I went the next day and I did good. Like I was going to pass until the very end when I accidentally drove on the wrong side of the road because I did a left-hand turn and I was going back into the DMV parking lot. That's what's so shitty about this whole thing. I was doing a left-hand turn and in LA, I don't understand. There can be 3 lanes for one side of the road and 1 lane for the other side of the road. And so I turned into the turning lane of the other side of the road before I turned into the DMV. And he was literally like, you were going to pass until then. But then he was also like, did you know you were going 30 in all the residential streets when the speed limit's 25? And I said, oh, it is? And he was like, yeah, but it would have been fine. And I was like, okay. But I failed. And then my dad came into town and I did one last test. And I told him that I hadn't done any tests yet. And so he was there. And then the guy that got into the car was like, oh, I can't do your test because I've already done it before. My dad was like, what? I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. What? And then so I got into the car with this other guy who was super nice and we were talking. He was like a drag queen. It was like cool. And we were having like, it was cool. We were like vibing. And then he told me to turn right. And this pedestrian walked out of nowhere and I braked in time. And so he was just like, oh my God, that was so good. I would have I would have hit them and stuff. So he passed me on that alone, which thank God. Because he knew that getting a driver's license in LA was so hard.
The way people drive in LA, I assume that like 90% of people have never even taken a driving lesson.
And so here's the thing. There's this girl I know from Texas, and her mom just signed off on her getting her driver's license. So I was like, her mom signed that she did this many hours, and you get your license automatically?
That is terrifying.
She was also a horrible driver. So
most people are from Texas.
Well, yeah.
Apologize to my Texas listeners.
I don't. They need to know. When I was last in Houston, like a couple of weeks ago, I literally was like holding the car because I was like, oh my God. And I was like, and if they honk, like someone's going to bring out a handgun at this point. Like.
So it sounds like your transition into LA was, from a mental standpoint, better than what your experience was moving to New York.
100%. I felt free again. I could actually live my life in a much happier way. And so I was like making new friends, and I was also able to like work properly at this point. Like I had my OPT visa, which came in after my after studying and stuff. And so I was really like fitting in, enjoying myself and like making friends. And But my biggest issue was like, once again, I was like avoiding like necessarily going to auditions and stuff because I started working in like the fitness industry, and I did that as a main hideaway from eating disorders and stuff. I always found a way to distract myself.
That's the best way to avoid your mental health issues, right?
100%. 100%.
Did you still struggle with your eating disorder in LA? Was it as bad as what it was in New York?
I struggled in a way of like, I wasn't throwing up and I was eating, but I hated the way that I looked. And so, like, I would never go shopping for clothes or anything because I felt so embarrassed and ashamed of my size. And like, I wasn't big at that point at all. I was probably like a size 8, a 6 to an 8. But
Yeah.
I just felt like I was like not worthy of living in the city. And I hated myself for not being able to stop eating and stuff.
So that obviously would have either triggered or contributed to your depression, and you still, again, you've got probably a better network of friends and people in LA, but did you still struggle with that loneliness and wanting to fit in? Like, did that kind of all tie in together?
Yeah, I think so. My granddad passed away and I wasn't able to go home just because of visa situations. And I just remember finding that really hard because when I would talk about it or something, people wouldn't necessarily understand, especially because my grandparents had like a big part of like me and raising me and stuff because they were in Ballarat and everything. And
Yeah.
it was very hard to like, a lot of people like haven't in the US haven't been in the situation where like you're literally stuck overseas and there's no way home. I don't think people understand, especially who are citizens of the US, like how lucky they are to like be able to not worry about visa requirements to get in and out, because you can be legally working here but not have a visa to get back in.
Yeah.
And so it's not as easy as just jumping on a 14-hour flight home. It's okay, if I'm on the other side, can I get a visa interview? When I spoke to an immigration lawyer, they're like, they may not put the OPT in your passport because you've only got 4 months left on it, so they may be like, nope. And so I don't really have a choice because my granddad would be like, stay, but so
Yeah.
it was very hard to just explain. And I think that I became isolated from that because nobody really understood, but I also couldn't explain it. And I also couldn't be mad at them for not understanding, but I just got very like in my shell again.
So did you disassociate yourself from that situation?
100%. And this was at the end of 2014, and I knew that my visa was expiring in June 2015. And so I knew that I needed to start getting ready to apply for my O1 visa. And I just didn't. I didn't put the work in. I didn't like, I don't know. I just distracted myself and I just, yeah, became disassociated to everything, that I just didn't do what I needed to do. And I regret that so much.
So what happened?
I left the US. I was working with a law firm that I used because people had told me they were good, but I never had good vibes from them. So I went back to Australia and was working on my O1 visa from Australia. And then I met a guy who fucked up a lot of my life. And pretty much like I was going back and forth to LA a lot on just like a tourist visa. And then I just dropped off on the O1 because I didn't think that I was going to be able to get it at that point. And so but this is like when we had started like working on the show that I was creating. So I had like friends who owned a production company and stuff in New York and LA. And so I was flying back and forth to meet with them and stuff. And then this guy that I was like also in love with, that was ruining my life, and my family hated him, everyone hated him and said it was a bad relationship. I literally paid for everything because he quit his job because I could pay for everything and stuff. Like, it was so fucking ridiculous. Yeah. And I was like, I need to move back to the US, and he couldn't get a visa there. And we were trying to get me a visa through the show. And so we ended up moving to Canada because Vancouver was the same time zone. It was easier for me to travel. I ended up applying for an O2 visa because someone else in the show was on an O1 visa. So it was easy for us to be connected to the O2. And then I got that, and I was traveling to LA during the week and then back to Vancouver on the weekends to see him. And then he said that I was selfish for not being there more. And so I literally went home one week and packed up my entire stuff and left and got rid of the apartment. And his mom had to come take him home.
So you made a decision for yourself.
Yeah, that was like one of the first times where I was like, okay, I'm done. I am done. And yeah, and I was also like now in love with somebody else.
That's also another reason to leave somebody.
Yeah. Not that he ever liked me back.
I have those celebrity crushes too.
Exactly.
I tell my wife. So recently you've had some traumatic experiences. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I pretty much in 2019, first, long story short, I was applying for my O1 after the O2, and I actually really easily qualified for it this time, but my lawyer had made a mistake in my application. So she didn't fill out a form correctly. I got denied, and in the denial letter was said your attorney didn't fill out this form correctly, so we had to deny you. And she also didn't tell me that I'd been denied. So I was waiting in the US. I didn't know for like 6 days. So I'd already overstayed my visa by 6 days at that point. And then I had a dog. I had everything in my life was there. So I had to like in a span of 10 days pack everything up. So I wasn't going to overstay for too long and go home. And I didn't know whether I was going to get back into the States or anything like that. And so that was like end of September, early October 2019. And then at this point, like, I was like, I need to go back to the US because the show that I'd sold had started filming, but obviously it stopped when I had to leave. And in January, we applied for my new visa in November 2019 with a different attorney, and I got in a request for additional evidence. And it was long. It was like 8 pages long. And like a request for additional evidence is normally like 3 pages long. And it was like, I didn't pass a single point on the visa, like nothing. I was like in tears. So I ended up going to Vancouver in January 2020, because at least I was on the same time zone once again. Yeah. And I still had a visa from the last time I was there. And my lawyer was like, no, it's fine. We're going to get you this. They're just being mean. It's the end of the year. Don't even stress. She was very calming about it all. And then I was living in Vancouver. We're in January 2020. Everything's about to shut down. We didn't know that. My sister gets in this horrific car accident, is unconscious in the hospital. This is the end of February in 2020. And like really bad, like rib cages had to be replaced and stuff. And so my parents and I made a decision being like, my visa application is going in next week. I'm going to find out about it in 2 weeks' time. So I'll just wait and do my interview in Australia if I get approved. There's no point in coming home now. She's unconscious. She's going to be okay, but she's unconscious. So not rush, come in 2 or 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And then COVID happens. So I'm like, oh, I can't go home. And then my US visa gets approved 3 days into COVID, but all the consulates are shut down. So I'm like, oh, cool, I have a US visa, but I can't get to the US. And then all flights to Australia are shut down except via the United States. So I can't go to the United States because I have a pending approval for a visa, but I can't enter with it. And then, and my work visa expires in Canada. So I'm literally like stuck in Canada, unable to leave, no income. And I also have my dog with me. And yeah, no way to get into the US. I'm like applying to the consulates for like a special consideration. They're like, sorry, we're closed. There's nothing we can do for you. And I'm literally just stuck in Vancouver. So that was fun. And then at the end of August, for the 5th time, I filled out one of those DS-160 forms and paid the money for an interview. Vancouver finally granted me a expedited appointment. So I went in, did my appointment, and then the guy at the office was just like so concerned about how long I'd spent in Canada, even though I was on like I transitioned to a visitor visa at that point. But he's like, "Why are you here?" And I was like, "Because I got stuck." I was like, "I don't want to be here." I was like, don't look at me like I don't have home ties. Like, I don't want to be here. I got stuck here. There's literally no way for me to go home. And I got approved. It was all fine. I went back to LA, and then we started filming, and then everything shut down again. Like January 2021, that time where everybody had COVID, everything shut down again. There was literally nothing we could do. Production was shut down. And obviously the production that went back first was like the high-end production, the things that are costing multi-million dollars and with huge people in it. We weren't back until April, pretty much. So I just chilled. And then fast forward 2 months, I'm like in downtown LA and I get punched in the face by a homeless person.
Jesus.
Randomly, really ran across the street, punched me in the face. Ironically, I was on the phone to my Botox person at the time. Because I just got in cheek filler and I was booking an appointment for Botox.
I don't know why I'm laughing. All I'm thinking is you talking to me like, yeah, in addition to Botox, I need to get my nose fixed as well.
Yeah. And luckily, and I'm always like have my AirPods in, but my phone was up here. And so he punched through my phone. My entire phone was smashed and stuff.
Wow.
But thank God my phone was there because that saved me a lot. But I remember I went to urgent care and they were like, "Oh, you're fine." I was like, "Really?" Because I can't see straight. And then yeah, I was like, "Okay, whatever." And then I let it be for a little bit, and then I finally was able to go back to Australia the day that they lifted the quarantine, because I also didn't want to spend 2 weeks in a hotel. Like, I knew that was going to drive me fucking crazy. Like, I couldn't do that. And so they finally lifted the 2-week quarantine rule for like vaccinated people. So I went home for 4 days because that's what I could do with filming schedule, work, etc. And then when I came back, like, I had this awful pain in my jaw, and I was like, "Oh, it's the altitude. I haven't flown that long for so long." The airplane was like hadn't flown. I was like, the airplane hadn't flown for a long time, so it's just that. Whatever. There was like 5 people in the plane. It's probably because of the air pressure was different with nobody there. And so I was like in so much pain, and then but it got like worse and worse. Like, I couldn't sleep at night. Like, it was throbbing, and me being me was like, it'll go away. I'm not going to go see a doctor. I had health insurance. Don't get me wrong. I have health insurance, but I also don't understand how health insurance in this country works. It's so stupid. And so
my wife,
it's like the dumbest shit ever. Like, I don't get it. Why am I paying money per month, but then I still have to pay at the doctor, but then I still, I don't know. But that's another story. But anyway, it turned out that I had a fractured jaw. So I eventually went to someone, and I was like, because I couldn't eat anymore. And I went to Canada again. I was in I went to the snow, and I like couldn't move in the snow. I was in so much pain. And so eventually they were like, "Yeah, your jaw is fractured, so we're gonna wire it for like 6 weeks or whatever." But they did it incorrectly, and I don't know how, because I paid a lot of money, but they did it incorrectly. So then I had to go to somebody else to get it fixed. And then they said it was fixed, it was fine. But I just moved apartments because there was a whole crisis at my old apartment, which another story, but my roommate went crazy and threatened to kill us all.
Wow.
So I just moved apartments, just broken the lease, had to pay like $10,000 money to like first month for security, extra money because I'm international, all that shit to my new place. and I just had the surgery, and I hadn't set up my apartment yet. I literally had a mattress on the floor, and I was super lightheaded from this surgery, and I stood up, and behind me, this half wall, I like fell into and hit my head. And like the same like area that I'd already been punched in the face in. And then I like passed out. I don't really remember much, but I got a traumatic brain injury from it, which led to bleeding in the brain, all that fun stuff. I was having
Yeah.
seizures all the time. And then ultimately ended up having to have like a huge brain surgery. It created some sort of tumor in my head. We don't know whether the tumor was created from the traumatic brain injury. It was a giant cell tumor, which is like it can be created from a traumatic brain injury, but it can also just grow on your bone.
Yeah.
We don't know, but like pretty much had to get that removed. And then after that, they couldn't get it all removed because of the position it was in. And so now I'm currently doing radiation. It's not like cancerous, but radiation's used to like also on like tumors that are non-cancerous, because they're almost more dangerous in your head because they can make your brain explode pretty much. Yeah, that's what I'm currently doing.
That's a lot.
Yeah, my mental health is not great right now.
So how are you coping with all of this right now?
I'm sad that I can't go back to Australia because I can't fly that far right now because of my head. But more than anything, I'm frustrated with the amount of money that is costing me, because there's so many better things I could do with money. Even though I have health insurance, it's still costing a lot.
Yeah.
I'm frustrated because I haven't been out of work. I've still created like content and stuff, but I haven't been out of focus or work. I'll have days where I just have to stay in bed, and I've worked so hard to be here and to live here and to like get through so much that it's just frustrating.
So when you're in these kind of spirals during the day, when things are getting too much, like, what do you? Obviously, you're there. Are you living alone?
Yeah, I live by myself. I have
So
like a really good friend who lives just around the corner and literally comes and visits me every day and drive me wherever I need to go and be at my appointments and stuff with me, which is amazing.
so you've got like a pretty good support network there. Like just
I have two friends like that. I don't know. This year I just cut out like a lot of people, not on purpose, but I just didn't have the energy to like see people. So I have
yeah.
two really good friends, and then I have a lot of people that I'm friendly with, and I love them, but I'm just not. I wouldn't say that they're not like in my current circle.
And you mentioned that you've recently just started getting back into therapy.
Yeah, I realized that with a traumatic brain injury, it triggers a lot of anger and stuff, or your mood and everything can change really easily. And I think over the years, I came up with a lot of coping mechanisms for like mood swings and stuff, but I failed at that with not failed per se, but with my brain injury, I lost everything that I'd worked on myself. And so I found myself in a position where my mood would just completely change. Like I swear to God, like some of the people in my life, like my friend that lives next door, like, not next door, but around the corner and stuff. Like, I have thrown my phone in front of her. I've like, had tantrums in front of her. I cannot believe that she's still in my life. It's the kind of behavior that like no person should put up with.
Friends like that are priceless.
Yeah, literally priceless.
So how is I have so many questions right now. So is your therapist helping you work through some of these sort of new techniques to help you with
Sort of. Mainly medicated me first.
that's always good.
So they put me on. Obviously, it's hard with brain injuries and stuff. Like what medication for your brain you can take, but they put
Yeah.
me on like a mood stabilizer, which helped. I'm on like 200 milligrams of it, so you'd hope it would help. But
Wow.
but it helped. But I also like I was talking to my therapist on Sunday, and I was like, it helps, but I'll still have like 2 shitty weeks out of 4 weeks, like 2 weeks where I literally just like want to cry. And I know some of that comes from not sleeping, and also like when your body's not stimulated to do stuff, it gets more depressed and everything.
Yeah.
And I know that, and a lot of therapists like, well, you've had a really hard 2 years, like, be kind to yourself. I'm like, I know, yeah, there's being kind to myself. Like, I don't hold it against myself, but also like, I want to get out of bed. I want to be able to clean my apartment and stuff. And yeah, they just put me on Prozac a couple of days ago, but I'm scared because my sister had really bad side effects from that. But I also said to my therapist or my psychiatrist, I was like, I refuse to be on any medication that makes me put on weight. I was like, if it makes me put on a pound, I was like, I'm finally happy. I don't count calories. I'm actually really stabilized with my weight. I don't feel the need to throw up. I don't feel guilty for things anymore. And I was like, but if I see myself putting on weight for medication, I will not take it. I will go unhinged. I don't care.
That's usually a common side effect with antidepressants, is like the
Yeah.
first thing that happens is the weight gain.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're trying. They're being very good. I sit down with them. We talk for a long time about this medication and this could be the side effects, but there's no weight gain or side effects. And I'm like, oh, suicidal thoughts, that's fine as long as there's no weight gain. No problem.
I mean, that's one way of looking at it.
I was like, I'll have suicidal thoughts either way. So
I've learned a lot about you over the last hour. You're strong, you're resilient, like you still have a very positive outlook on life. What has the last 10, 15 years taught you about yourself?
I definitely don't give up.
Yeah.
I would say that I easily run away from situations, and I like when things get tough, my immediate reaction is to move. I will pack up and move. I have no problem. I think especially being international, I've learned that majority of people are replaceable. And I don't say that in a mean way, but I say, I have this kind of friend here, I'll make exactly the same kind of friend in another place. There's always one or two friends that like will stay with you for life and they are not replaceable, but majority of people are. So jobs are replaceable, everything's kind of replaceable. So I definitely run away. But I've also learned that like all in all, I fit into this lifestyle so much better. Like the people and stuff here, like I have so many, I know that the US is crazy and this and that, but like, I just think the same as a lot of people here. Not a lot because this country is literally divided, but the smarter half. But I feel like I definitely am happier here. I love the sun in LA. I love just like sometimes just walking around being like, yo, I fucking live in LA. This is the life that like I dreamed about as a kid. I cannot believe that I did it and stuff. So I think like I'm learning to be a lot kinder to myself and proud of what I've done and proud of what I'm doing, because this for a lot of people is just a dream. Or people get green cards through the lottery or through this and that and stuff. And I'm like, I'm like, one thing that I'm really proud of is I've really worked my ass off to be in this situation.
That's something my therapist has been trying to teach me too, is like just take a moment to think about where you are and how you got there and just be like, fuck, like I did this.
Right. Like even this podcast is so cool. It's like you fucking created it. Like you did that. And a lot of people talk about it, especially in LA, but a lot of people talk about moving to LA. So the fact that you're doing it is fucking cool.
It started by accident. It was more so, it started as a way for entrepreneurs to actually just talk about like shit they were going through, because I was just tired of seeing my friends kill themselves. Like people that I know, just you wake up and you read the paper. Someone that had basically just decided to.
That was it, yeah.
Yeah, that was it. And I was just like, no one's talking about it. Everyone's like, oh, positive mental health, post something positive on Instagram.
I know,
like,
right? But then when something happens, what do I hear? Everyone supports mental health until somebody needs actual support.
Yeah, exactly. What you've been talking about, what you've been through today, is just been amazing. And it's a testament to your strength and the way your resilience and the way that you've just been able to say, well, you know what? shit has happened to me, but fuck it, I'm going to keep going.
But yeah,
I
there's no
know.
other option, right? Last thing I'd want to do is to be back in Australia and be like, yo, okay, none of that was fucking worth it. Like, you bet your ass. Like, I work to be here. I'm staying here. I don't give a fuck.
I used to tell my dad when I'm going back to Australia is if they put me in a box. So,
Literally.
so what's next for you?
Hopefully, once this is passed, I just got my new visa. It was super easy. So impressed because it came in like 8 days and there was no request for additional evidence, nothing. It was just like that, which made me very shocked because I thought I wasn't going to get it till next year. But I just got my new visa, so I'm hoping once radiation is done and I finally start to get back on my feet. I've definitely done a lot more long-term kind of deals or brand deals and stuff over the last couple of months that I really want to put a lot of effort into. I want to mainly put a lot of effort back into social media because so many people, especially on TikTok, are nice. I don't know. I know a lot of people haven't had that experience, but at the same time, it's cool to just build your own shit that way and to have nobody can tell you what's wrong or what's right as long as you're like not offending. Well, everyone gets offended by everything, but not purposely doing shit to fuck people up. And also write again. And I don't know. I really love funding my own stuff and then selling them to networks instead of auditioning because it gives me all the power. And if I'm gonna fucking, I've been on the side of the casting. I've cast people and shit, like big stuff, and like I have had hundreds of auditions sent to me by a self tape, and I promise you, I've not watched them all. I don't have time, so I'm not gonna spend an hour fucking making a self tape for somebody to not be watched. My time is actually more valuable than that.
I
Make my own
100%
shit.
Well, that's awesome. All right, I'm gonna do an outro, but yeah, don't hang up after.
Okay.
Alli, thank you so much for being on the show today. Your journey is just amazing, inspiring. Like, you're just one of the most awesome people and doing the expat community proud.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And yeah, okay, that should be it. I'm just gonna end that.